this is going to be the introductory talk, and you will be seeing if you're like if you're like super familiar with it, or you're already an expert, you might find some pieces a bit boring. But for some pieces, like if you're a beginner, it will be probably a nice introduction to serverless, or actually more precisely with AWS SAM. So anyway, let me start. So there's going to be like a small presentation, I guess 15 minutes, like 6 till 6:20 or 6:25. We'll be like doing a little small presentation, and then we'll jump into some demos and what what's it about, how does it work, and so forth. Anyway, so do you guys see my screen?
Seems fine, yeah.
Yeah, so you see so you see the presentation, okay. I just wanted to confirm that, please. Okay, so let's start. I'm gonna tell like a little story. I like to usually tell it like in a very similar way with some characters, so some of us can identify with them. So meet Slobodan. Slobodan is a good friend of mine, and Slobodan has a business idea, and he would like to start something. He's not sure if it will succeed and so forth, and he would like to build it. And this is me, and I'm literally as you probably know, like screaming from the top of my lungs, build with serverless is the best way, and yada yada yada. And he gets upset. Of course, why wouldn't he? Because now, as you can see online, there's like a bunch of stuff like serverless is, it scales per use. I guess some of you have seen this, like there's no server management or ops. You don't pay for idle, there's automatic failover, it's faster delivery, and things go on. Business is more profitable, and you can see a lot of like blog posts about it and so forth. And he's like, serverless, code needs to run on servers. What does this serverless thing mean? I guess I don't have to explain like this topic, but the guys usually like, particularly if you come from a C or assembler kind of eras, you're probably going to be upset and say the other guys are idiots. Like there isn't such a thing as serverless. And although it has a shady name, that's not the point of serverless. So I like to use the same expression from a friend of ours, Goiko, who says it's serverless the same way Wi-Fi is wireless. So of course, Wi-Fi has wires, and we're all familiar with that. But it's not about that. It's about the end user, kind of the client side, where you don't have to think about serverless anymore, and you no longer have to think about the wires that you can use for your phone or something like that. You can just connect your Wi-Fi. Anyway, so my friend Slobodan, he heard this statement. He was like, okay, this kind of makes sense, right? And so he said, okay, let's try. And he's like, okay, I want to learn about what this serverless thing is. So this can be some other friends of yours, whoever it is. And, people start hearing about this, about AWS Lambda, AWS S3, API Gateway, DynamoDB, all those services that some providers, in this particular case, AWS provides. And people start looking at the new architectures where you can see like a diagram, like a small service, a small CRUD API can be sometimes consisting of like hundreds of small scale services, and people are like sometimes afraid, but they kind of get the concept that things are now separate and changed, and they kind of get the idea. But the thing is, where people kind of get stuck is like, how do we? Okay, we heard about it. We heard about this fancy stuff, automatic scaling, and blah 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 blah. How we used to sell this stuff, how they say, and they're like, okay, how do I start building? I want to build something with it. Where do I go? Where do I start? And that is the question. How did and where did serverless start? And actually, to be honest, it initially started from the UI. And some of you might be like, wait, serverless started from the UI? How does that even make sense? But actually, the first way how you would build with serverless, you would have to like go to the UI console, go to the Lambda folder, and you basically would have to manually in the UI create this stuff, and then upload the code base. And this is how basically, the first kind of services that AWS provided, and serverless even started. Like you need to go to the UI and upload stuff and manually sometimes even create, which is ridiculous, right? And basically you would go to an application, you go and find the lambda and click create. And let me now do a little, like a small example. How would that kind of look like? So let me go to the management console. So let's say you created your AWS account. I guess you guys seem to see the screen, right? You see the console?
Yes, yes.
Okay, great. So you kind of see this stuff, and you're like, okay, you click here, there's 1,000 stuff here. Like, there's like 300 something services. And you're like, where do I, like, what's this serverless? Is this serverless? Is this, or what, So anyway, but at the time there was like 100. So, you can now see how much Amazon or AWS actually has evolved. So you say, okay, I want to do this. So you would go to, this Lambda, and, you would go to the Lambda console, and then you would say, okay, these are, I have a lot of functions, as you can see, but let's say, let's create a function, and you have to write a name, look at how tedious this is. And we can say like AWS Breeze test lambda, blah, blah. And, like there's a bunch of stuff here that you would have to do. And you can choose a runtime, these are languages it can, these are the languages it supports. But let's say, Node.js 12. And let's say create a version, create a function, and it's now doing something, and this is basically how we used to do it, like 2014, and you can still do it this way, though it's not recommended. And as you can see here, there's like a designer, you can see some like triggers, like there's a bunch of stuff, and here's some code base. And nowadays, at the time you weren't able to see the code base, but basically, right now you can start doing serverless without having to learn about AWS SAM at all. And you could write something here, something like this, and if you wanted to like test your kind of function, basically this is a simple function. Let's say we do a little like console log here and say hello AWS Greece, and okay, we save it, and then we say test. So it actually requires an event. So first thing you realize is that this lambda is now isolated. So there is no way you can reach out. But lambdas by themselves, so they are actually completely sleeping. They're not executing it at all. They're not running all the time. They're just like dormant. And then you need to find a way how to trigger them. And to trigger them, you need to have an event. And this is why you're saying configure a test event, basically. So you say a test event, AWS Greece. Oh, okay, AWS Greece. And then we can say create. So we can create this event, and we click test. And then we say like execution result. And basically, voila, this is how you basically create your first Lambda function, right? It seems super easy. And yeah, this is all what it is. You can see there's a log here. You can see even the logs over there. So this is basically all there is to creating a first serverless function. It's as simple as this. But imagine now that you have to create 50 of them. So you have this huge AWS, you have this huge architecture diagram, and you have like 30 Lambda functions you need to do. Like this is impossible to do it through UI, right? And yeah, basically this is the tricky part. Like, how do you do it? And coming back to the UI, you can see there's a lot of stuff that you can set up here, VPC, X-ray, and there's a bunch of stuff. We won't be covering everything, but you can see what it's about. But the main focus from the UI console for AWS Lambda is this piece, where you see like the designer, what are the event triggers, and where is Lambda maybe sending the data, which means its destination, and your code base. So basically, if you wanted to start doing serverless, and you were like, yeah, I just wanted to do that, you can just go from here, even though it's not recommended. Not the best, like the easiest approach as a developer, but you could even start from here. So yeah, this is all there it is. But now let's go back to the presentation. But as I kind of said, what if you had 30 Lambdas? and you have like 5 database tables, and you have APIs and a bunch of stuff. You know, configuring this and setting up this is not that easy, right? It doesn't seem as trivial, and it's a lot of manual labor. And also, how do you update? How do you change things like this? And this is a problem. So it gets easier. And you know, I think 2008 or 10, I'm not sure exactly on the exact year, like that's like 10 years ago, imagine, AWS has created something called AWS CloudFormation. So this CloudFormation is basically of a way, how do you textually represent and structure things that you have here on the console. You see, you see these like services over there. So how do you textually can represent these kind of infrastructure that you're using, like Lambda, Lightsail, whatever you want to do, S3, whatever, and how can you, you know, easily create it without having to go through the UI and everything? So they kind of created this this kind of let's say templates, a templating language called AWS CloudFormation, where you can see on my screen right now, you can see, I'm not sure if it's maybe like the letters are maybe too small on your screen or something. Feel free to let me know. But you know, you can see that, you know, for example, you start writing this template by saying, you know, these are the resources. You start writing the resources. By the way, we'll be doing those. We'll be doing that, you know, also through the demo. And you know, you basically say, I want to have, I don't know, an API. Then you say, you know, here's a resource name. This is its type, as you can see here on on line 17 and 18 on the screen. And then you specify certain properties. And then if you want to do something else, you do. If you want to do another resource like a Lambda, you say AWS Lambda function or serverless function in this case. And you basically can do it, and it's a lot easier. So, and then when you wanna, like, you know, update this or change this, you just kind of use this CloudFormation, this text, like this templating language, which can be also in JSON or in JSON or in a like a YAML file, as you can see in front of you. It's a like YAML structure. So basically, you can, you know, set up things, and you just need to know, you know, all the bunch of these kind of like properties that you need to write, like, you know, for example, for what are the properties for a lambda function, what are the properties for a DynamoDB table, and so forth. And yeah, and there's a lot of them, as you can see. And yeah, how does basically CloudFormation work? So you kind of, as you can see on the screen, like this image comes from the CloudFormation from this website, as you can see here on the screen, wsamazon.com CloudFormation. So what you're doing is you write this templating language in your file. You write it down, as I mentioned, YAML or JSON, and then you basically need to upload it to an S3. So because this majority of the AWS services pick up things from an S3 bucket. And then, you know, AWS CloudFormation service picks this up from an S3 bucket, and then it kind of changes, goes through it, and then creates resources based on this language. And yeah, you're gonna get this output, like what was created and so forth. And the people get kind of upset, like, because it's like, you know, this is too much. Like, you know, you write a bunch of text. Okay, you get it. It's a lot easier than writing a, you know, basically like clicking manually through the UI. But can this be simpler? And basically, yeah, it can. And I kind of like this statement, you know, from the Jehovah's Witness guys who said, like, have you heard about our, you know, savior? And I'm like, you know, have you heard about our savior, AWS SAM? Where AWS has, like, 2017, I think 2016, it was the first kind of initial announcement, but 2017 they kind of released this AWS Serverless Application Model, which is basically you know, an easier way of building the same stuff, which is like the templating language. And you can find it as an open source. And the thing which they did was they basically took the you know, the descriptions, let's say like the properties that you needed to specify, the verbosity of the properties you needed to specify for these like infrastructures like lambdas and DynamoDB or whatever, and they kind of narrowed it down, like made an abstraction out of it, where you can just like say, like what you saw on the screen, like AWS, and you just need to write a few things. So I'm gonna do now a little demo. So I think we're right on time. Yeah, 6:19, perfect. So I will actually basically show you a few things. So let me show you like what's the thing, how should it look like. So in this case, this is, do you see it on my screen? Do you see the VS Code? I just need to check.
Yes.
Okay, perfect.
We can see.
Yeah. So I guess it's maybe too small, but yeah, I think I might change its size now. But anyway, what you need to do is basically like you can see it from here. Let's kind of remove this piece. Yeah, I have some, even linting of the this template. So what you need to do is with the SAM is basically this is all you needed to do to write a single function. So let's say this is a case called like listing coffee, and what you needed to do is you just need to like kind of write this template YAML file or JML or YML. You don't have to write YAML with an A inside, and you just like you don't even have to write this description basically. Only things you need to do is kind of set up this transformation. So this is going to be the key piece. And then you need to write like resources. And the resources are the things that you want to create. So for example, if for this case, you're writing a function that's supposed to kind of list some coffee, and you write down like a resource name. So we could, for example, in our case, let's do it like this. We can say hello Greece, and then we say type. Let me just like delete this piece. So we can say type, and we can say AWS. So there's like this notation. As you can see, I have autocomplete on this stuff, but in majority of cases you won't have this. But if you're using VS Code, you can actually add these plugins, and you just say type AWS. These are like the namespaces, and you say serverless, and then you say a function, and basically. This is how you declare like the resource name, resource type, and then you say properties, and then you say, okay, what are the things that we need to specify? We need to specify like a handler. What's the like every AWS Lambda is actually like a busy. So all of the resources you're creating are basically like in the past you would have to buy and set up, I don't know, a server. You would need to install stuff and so on and so forth. In this case, like all this stuff is like basically has evolved to this piece where you say hello and you type, which is like the name of the resource, the type, and this is basically what you're saying is like this is like this is what I want to create, and it does everything it's required to supply the container and install everything that's it for you and so forth. And then you specify, okay, what are the properties of this serverless function? And there are like several things which are required, which is like a handler, a runtime, and basically, other things like beside handler, you can say, I don't know, memory size. You can see like a bunch of stuff here. I think, let me just see if it can, no. Doesn't matter. I'll show you afterwards. So, for example, a handler actually represents basically the route to the path to the file which you wanna kind of load. So, for example, if the file, let's say in our case it's called index.js, so the file name is index, then you put a dot, and then you call the method which you exported, as the handler, which is the method that actually AWS Lambda is going to call when it gets triggered. So as we mentioned before, serverless is basically an event-driven system. So none of the infrastructure works like you don't get charged for anything unless something calls it. So for example, in our case, let's say somebody says hello, our function doesn't do anything. When a hello message kind of arrives to AWS kind of routes it to our serverless function. We'll talk about how does it route it, and because we talked that lambda is isolated. So basically some other service needs to call it. So the event comes to this serverless function, and this serverless function its container wakes up and it says, okay, what do I need to do now? So by its setup, it needs to call a handler. So there's a handler method. So it actually needs to call your code base, which you specify, which is the file. So this is the file you upload into the function. And this file has a method called handler. Let's see it like that. And if the file is in the same, if the file is in the same folder on the same path as this template YAML, basically then you don't need to specify anything else except the runtime. But the runtime is basically, it's, as it says, runtime, but it's like which kind of programming language do you want to set up? In our case, and as the language I kind of prefer is JavaScript. You can use Python, C#, Java, whatever. So you just say Node.js 12.x. So there's also supported version is 10, or not Node.js. They used to support like 6 and 8, but they dropped the support for those two as Node.js is evolving super fast. And this is basically everything you need to do to set up this lambda function to write what is the recipe for this function. So as I mentioned now, recipe is basically the best way how to think about this infrastructure. So what you're doing is you need to specify first this transformation. This transformation is actually super tied to AWS SAM. So as I mentioned, AWS SAM is this abstraction over CloudFormation, which basically means you don't have to write a bunch of other stuff here. Like if it was just pure CloudFormation, it would be written like this. You would have only lambda function, and then you would need to specify a bunch of other properties, and also what are the triggers for this, like specify the rules, the permissions, and everything. But with SAM, it introduces this, as you can see here, like this transform AWS serverless. So this is basically saying, oh, I want to use this transformation. I want to use this SAM's kind of notation that it's using. And this allows us to use this AWS serverless function, this namespace called serverless. And this serverless namespace, basically what it says is, I am actually taking care of this, of the rest of the properties. I'm going to set up some default values, and you don't have to worry about it. Anyway, but not to go into the nitty-gritty now. So basically, I just skipped this template format version, but this is basically a standard thing that goes to every CloudFormation thing. But like these are the things which are most important for you guys. So as I said, these are the key things. So how does this basically work? So you would now need to have an index function, an index file, and written in Node.js. If it's written in some other language, it will not work. So when you deploy it, it won't work, and it needs to have this handler. But anyway, let's actually start from let's start from scratch. So this is just an explanation on how would you write certain this templating thing, which basically is doing the clicking on the UI. So I'm gonna basically go to my console now. And I'm going to do things from console. Like I guess some of you may prefer it. So a good thing that comes with AWS SAM is something called AWS SAM CLI. As you probably guessed, every single thing on the planet Earth probably now has a CLI. It's this command line interface, and AWS SAM has one. Great, right? Another CLI interface which you need to install in your system, which is amazing. So AWS SAM has one, and it's invoked using the SAM. But I mean, you can go and see how do you install AWS SAM CLI. I don't think that's kind of necessary for this kind of meetup talk. But let's just start using it. And if you don't have this installed, you can ping me after the talk, or like just go, and there's like a very nice way and super easy and now working way. It actually wasn't that smooth to install it before, but like since maybe a year or two, it's a lot smoother to install this CLI. It was actually pretty troublesome in some points. But now, for example, if you wanted to start a project, you just say SAM and you say init, right? And then it says, okay, it has this guide thing, like which kind of template source would you like to use? And for our case, we're just gonna do like trace1, which is like some quick start templates. If you get confused by some of this stuff, like my suggestion is like always start using these quick start templates, because they can actually set up some projects, some stuff for you which you have to do manually. And as serverless by itself is focused on actually easing our developer, it's focused on us providing more business value, not on us setting up tilting our configuration. They kind of set up this init command with SAM CLI, which can help us set up the project quite easily. So in our case, we wanted to use Node.js 12. I mean, we can use any of these which are available, but in our case, we're going to go with one. And we can say, okay, what's the project name? I'm going to say AWS Greece, and let's call it SAM meetup, something like this. So what they're doing is it goes to these templates, as you can see here. So my suggestion is, if you can copy this and go to these templates and see, these are basically, this kind of like, I don't know if you guys are familiar with React or have used some like Create React app or some other CLI tools for quick project setups. You could just go there and see which ones are available and so forth. And in our case, let's go start with the one which is like the hello world example. And so what it did is just created this, folder, our project folder called AWS Green SAM Meetup. So my suggestion is start doing it from your root folder, and then it will create another folder for your project. So you go there, and if we now take a look at what it created some files. But anyway, it doesn't make sense to take a look at it through the console. Let's open it up from our VS Code. So I'm gonna just do an open here, and then let me just kind of open up this one. And yeah, now let's kind of expand this piece. So as you can see, it created a few folders. Maybe I think my font is too small. I guess you're probably squinting now. What the hell is this guy doing? But anyway, this is basically what it created. As you saw before, our function was super small, but this is super quite a lot, right? But what it did was it actually created a bunch of descriptions and abouts. For example, there's a description here. You can just go and delete it. These outputs is something that we can talk about it afterwards. So I can just we don't have to delete this piece, but I'm just gonna undo after we talk about the rest. So let's even remove this piece. And so what it did was it actually created, as you can see from the resources. So as you can see, it still uses this transformation, which means it's using SAM. This is one of the easiest way. How do you find that? How do you discover that your your code is using SAM is by taking a look at this template and seeing this transform AWS Serverless 2016. Basically, this is the, it's basically telling the CloudFormation, because actually SAM is using CloudFormation below. I know it sounds a bit maybe too complex, we have this lambda. For some people, it might sound too complex. But basically, we're still using CloudFormation as just the abstraction kind of piece above it. That's all. Anyway, so we specify the resources, and then we say, okay, we're gonna do a hello world function. This is the type, so we can delete this piece, but you can click on these links and see what it's about. We see some properties, and now we see some other stuff, which is there's this code URI, which we haven't talked about, and so you see the handler. It says app handler, and it says runtime, which we already said, which we talked about, and these events. So let's actually delete this piece. Let's focus on what we talked before. So we have the resources, hello world function. We specify the type. So this code URI is basically a way of how do you specify kind of folder structure for this handler. Because what if we had, like, as we talked before, 30 lambdas, and imagine having like 30 files here. What SAM would do when it deployed, and we'll talk about deployment as well, it would basically pick up everything from this folder, like everything that's here from the project root. It would pick everything up and deploy it. But if we specify code URI, it means, so basically, this is kind of the folder where it is. You can even put more complex things like holder and source and things like this. Right, in our case, it basically creates a hello world folder. And as you can see here in the hello world folder, we have the tests, npm ignore, app.js, package.js. And in this app.js, this is what we have. As you can see, there's a lot of descriptions here, like a lot of comments. Pretty useful, but I'm not sure how, it might overwhelm you at the moment if you're a rookie or beginner or something, This is basically what it says. Like, you need to do exports, and you specify the lambda handler. So this is, you export lambda handler, which is an async function, and these are the standard parameters that go through every lambda function basically. And you say, okay, we want to try to do this. If some of you are unfamiliar with Node.js, basically, like from the latest kind of couple of years, you can use try catch, await, and things like that. So it's, the code is a lot cleaner, particularly if you come from a Java background or from like C# background, you're familiar with this piece. Anyway, so what it does is basically created that. It just like returns this response. It kind of formulates the response and it returns it, nothing else. Like, as you can see, this function takes the event that comes and deploys it. And but now, so this is everything that this function does. This function basically just like something triggers it and it returns the status code of 200 and a body. But yeah, as you can see here, there's nothing else here. But before I started deleting, there was something. But anyway, let's focus on like this piece called code URI hello world. This basically means that things that are in the hello world folder are going to get deployed into this function. So what if you didn't have this? It would basically deploy everything from the root. But if you specify this code URI, which is now super useful, because, for example, we don't want to send the README into our Lambda, which means if we sent this, if we didn't have this, it means that, as I mentioned, like the git ignore, README, template, YAML, I mean, this would all get uploaded. But what's the problem with it? I'm guessing you're like, it's pretty obvious, right? But the problem is each time Lambda gets triggered, so as I said, it's kind of sleeping, it's dormant. So it would actually load up the function with this code. Now, this is not a big problem, but let's say you're working on a huge enterprise system, and this Lambda function is being called 1,000,000 times. And this is not a rarity. This happens a lot because these Lambda functions are basically like, those small isolated pieces of your code, or like small, how they call it, nano services that are doing something. And imagine 1,000,000 times loading the README with a Lambda. It's ridiculous, right? Doesn't make a lot of sense, because as with serverless, you're paying per use. So if you're actually putting like these unnecessary files like readme or git ignore, Lambda needs to load these files as well with it, even though it's going to execute just the app.js. This container needs to load out all those files. So why not make it cheaper for you and like just like avoid these things and only focus on having the most necessary things in this app.js, in this hello world folder, which is what you want. Anyway, so we have this code URI, basically specifying that this code that is from here, they get deployed. So let's go back. So what's this event stuff that we had before? So this event stuff is basically it's basically specifying what are the event triggers for the Lambda function. So what is it that Lambda should be tied to that it can trigger a Lambda function? So for example, in this case, so we say events, because you can specify multiple of them. We can specify, for example, a couple of things, in this YAML ugly way. Basically, you go, so in this events kind of structure, you specify the name of the event, and you specify what's its type, properties of the event. The event type is, in our case, is actually called an API, but because you are actually using SAM, so this basically, as we talked, SAM provides a lot of abstraction. SAM actually allows us to abstract away the API implementation. So what does that mean? As we talked, from the beginning of the lecture, we said that everything that you need, that you create on for your infrastructure, you need to specify it as a resource. So for example, this would require that we have something like this. We have this, for example, called Hello World API, and we would specify here something like, I don't know, Serverless API. So we need to specify every single piece, right? And well, what SAM does, it actually knows that you want to do an API, and then you will need to, by the way, you would have to then specify what are the API endpoints. So for example, if you want to do I don't know, the routes, let's say you want to do you want to specify a resource called worlds, or cities for in Greece. You would need to specify what is the route, the method, and everything, and a bunch of other stuff. So, but with SAM, what you have out of the box is that the moment you write events, Hello World API with these properties, which are the necessary properties, it automatically creates this API for you. So everything you need to do to create an API with one Lambda function is this. This is the piece of code. So you need to you specify the API. So this actually automatically infers this resource and the event resource, and it actually even connects. So it actually creates the resource, and creates this integration point between the API and the Lambda. So before, while you were doing monolithic functions, for example, let's talk about Express.js or some other Node.js, or maybe some other framework, you would specify in your code base, you would specify endpoints, everything in a single kind of service, right? With serverless, things are much more separate. Everything scales down in size in order to be vertically scalable. So because, for example, you want these things to be isolated, because what if, for example, the API fails and your serverless function doesn't fail, or maybe your function is failing but your API isn't? Well, it means that this API is going to work with other functions, because one single API can call many other. You can actually integrate a single API to different functions. So if one function is failing, the rest of your code is isolated from, one function is isolated from another, and it can still function. It won't fail. So you have this consistency of these resources, which basically, if a single resource fails, the others aren't failing, unless this resource is calling the rest. For example, a single function can call another one, which is big, or it can actually invoke a DynamoDB. By the way, there are some best practices, what should call a Lambda function. Should it call another Lambda function? Why or why not? The recommendation is not, but we'll, maybe for some other lecture we can talk about best practices in serverless. But anyway, so coming back to what we talked about here, events, is basically you use this property called events, and you can specify multiple types of events that can trigger this Lambda function. And with SAM, you can just use this piece and automatically infer to the creation of the resources for this Lambda function that that are integrated with it. Okay, so what it means is we have an API endpoint with a path hello, get on this path, and now if we go to the hello, when we deploy this, we would actually then automatically on this API endpoint, we would automatically call this hello world Lambda function. Okay, now if we delete it back again, in their example, they actually created, they kind of explicitly specified. You don't need to do that, but in some cases you can specify these sections. Anyway, so let's talk about this here called globals. So in this kind of template, what this means is for every function that's in this template, for every resource. So this global, actually, let me go back one step. The globals piece is actually specifying for every resource that's specified here in your template, every type of a resource. So in this case, it's function. What it means is like every function, as you can see here, it's highlighted here. So every function that's created in this template automatically set up timeout 3. So this might be useful. So let's say you want to say that every single piece of your code should be running runtime or running on Node.js. So you can just specify and press enter here. And this basically means that every single Lambda function that you create here will automatically have a timeout of 3 seconds. So this is what this timeout means. It means that the maximum duration, the maximum execution time of a Lambda function is 3 seconds. You can raise this to 15 minutes. Anyway, or like, that's, I think that's not I think, that's like actually the maximum size. Before it was, I think, even less. So the maximum execution time of Lambda function, because you're charged on a Lambda function, you're charged per 100 milliseconds. You can't specify 100 milliseconds here. Like you can only put integers, so you can actually specify like if you want to do like you can specify 1 second or things like that. Anyway, so we can keep like runtime like to 3 as functions. But anyway, now you can see this is like CFN lint is like this. There's a tool I mentioned like called CloudFormation linter, which kind of lints your code base in case you have some errors. But in my case, I don't think I updated it, so it actually is able to understand that every function in the globals has this runtime. So I'm just gonna put it here so you don't get confused. Like there's an error in his code or something. Anyway. So basically what we did here is I was just playing around. I just want to go back to what's the beginning template so when you do it, you don't get confused. So now at the end of the template, so we have, as you can see, there are these kind of root kind of properties called like, okay, template, the header, template, format version, transfer, globals, resources, and then we have outputs. So what is an output? An output is basically when CloudFormation creates these resources, you want to say, okay, this process has created these and these resources, and I want you to pinpoint these ones, which is like the Hello World API, Hello World function, and Hello World function template rule. So what are these outputs kind of pinpointed resources? What does this mean? Well, it means basically like on a single process that which you have, you want to output some variables that someone else can use. So how can you might be asking yourself like, what can use these things? Well, you can actually combine these templates. You can have multiple endpoints, multiple templates, and multiple kind of applications. And for example, one application can rely on another. So you can actually say when this function completes, take the outputs of this template. So this is template, let's say template YAML, and we have another template called template 2, whatever. And this template 2 is actually reliant on the previous templates, on the previous template, the one we have, and its outputs. And basically, you're just like exporting things outside. Anyway, so you have the Hello World API. You can specify description. You don't need to specify description, but it's useful for some other developers if they, for example, if you have a public components like I do on the Serverless app repo, and you want someone else to consume your apps and to share it, so you can basically do it. You should write actually a description and explain what this endpoint called Hello World API is, and in the value specify what it is. So this is this is basically the value. So what you see here is something which you will find it everywhere, which is like the default formatting for an API kind of output, the HTTP kind of resource. And so it's a bit static, it's a bit fixed, right? I also agree with that. And what it does is basically it's evaluating this, like it's using the Serverless REST API. As you can see here, it talks about it, implicit API, blah, 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 blah. I mean, we talked about it before. And you need to kind of specify it in this way, because this is actually the proper way. I mean, I don't understand yet why this piece, like maybe this piece should be a bit more like in a single variable called serverless REST API to like output. Like, but I guess they will fix it sometime in the future without us having to manually configure this piece. And then you can specify the hello world function and so forth. So what else did we delete here? So yeah, basically description. Yeah, that's it. So so I mean, you can see here there is a big README, and you can do a bunch of stuff here. What it actually recommends is that now we go. I mean, that you go through the hello world piece. I mean, you can when you install AWS SAM, you can do it yourself and take a look at every single file here. What it does is, I mean, as you can see here, I mean, some of you might be asking, like, why are we, uploading tests on a Lambda function? I agree with that. I don't think this piece should be in the hello world folder. I think it should be outside of the folder here. But yeah, basically, this is what their template, creates. I think these things should be automatically cleaning up, so you don't have package.json or something like that. You can just use app.js. But by the way, sorry, you need to have package.json. Why? Because for example, in this case, it doesn't use anything. Like, it doesn't use any external module. But if you want to do something, so you would need to install the node modules here in Lambda function, which means you have to install Lambda modules in every single piece, in every single Lambda function manually, unfortunately, yet. Still, not yet, sorry. So for example, in our case, we would have to go now to the hello world. And then, let me just clean this up so you can see my screen. And then we do an npm install, which will basically, I mean, this is what you should do, like for each of your Lambda functions, because you're going to be creating them. And yeah, so as you can see, it installs these node modules and things like that. And yeah, so your next question is like, okay, let's say we have this piece. Let me go back to here, this piece, so you can maybe read about it while I'm talking. But not now. Anyway, so what do we do now? So so how do we deploy? That might be your question. So let's exit. We need to go from the root. So the root is actually where you want to do the deployment. You want to do it from the place where the template file, so this CloudFormation template is being defined, which is in the root of our project. By the way, you have here events. What is this events? So SAM enables you to run locally your functions. So before this kind of functionality, because at the beginning of serverless you couldn't do that. So I know it sounds like, well, how would you test? Well, I'm gonna be honest, the meme test in production. Well, this is how sometimes people did it. Actually, they would actually create a SAM kitting, and they would actually create their own separate environment, and they would test there. But in the majority of the cases, so they would basically deploy and then test how it worked and so forth, and they would locally test the functions, you could run the Jest or Mocha or some other tools that you're using to run your test. You would see that it works. It kind of works, right? And then you would deploy, and then you would say, "Oh crap! It doesn't send messages to the DynamoDB table somehow." So yeah, this is how it actually used to work. But now you can actually run these functions locally and even simulate certain events. So this is why these events are required. If you remembered in our first piece when we did through the UI. So if you remember, the events kind of creation model. Well, this is what these events are. They basically is simulating the same event that you created there, even though we just created a couple of things. What we created there was just the body, what is the data, what is the payload that is actually being sent to the Lambda function. Everything else was automated. So in our case, it's this is actually a request that comes from an API, since we actually use this template. For example, if you did it from scratch without using this SAM CLI, you would have to actually write this kind of, not manually, but you would have to go to the logging on AWS, and it's a tool called CloudWatch, and you would go there and take a look, and you would copy this event and then paste it here in the event JSON kind of structure. But anyway, if you're using a template, you can get this automatically for you, and you can even generate events and things like that. Anyway, now let's go back to the deployment. So this is our stuff. This is our hello world function with an API, right? So we go here to the root of our project, and SAM. Actually, let me do a little like an explanation, because in some places, especially if you're a beginner, you'll find a lot of outdated things. So, for example, I have a friend who recently is now starting with serverless, such as some of you guys here, and he's like, there's a bunch of outdated stuff. I don't know where to look and things like that. But so this is why I'm kind of explaining to you guys like some of the, the nitty-gritty from the beginning, so you can understand when you see a certain tutorial that it maybe is really outdated and there's a better way to do things. And SAM is the proper way. How do you write serverless apps now? Even though you have serverless framework, which is also very good, and used in production as well. In my opinion, I'm just like, at the moment, like mostly focusing on SAM. Anyway, so with SAM, you can just use deploy. But if you just use deploy, you would see like it's gonna complain and say, well, you didn't specify some stack. Do you want to use SAM guided? So let me just click on this, and you will see the same message. So you will see like SAM deploy options. You wanna do? You would like some help? But anyway, it says missing option stack name. SAM deploy guided can be used to provide blah 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 blah. Which is basically saying use SAM deploy guided. You don't have to. Like if you specify certain things, you don't have to do it. But for your beginning, like for your beginnings with serverless, I really recommend using SAM deploy guided, because it will actually explain a few things along the way. So in our case, let's do it. So we're gonna say SAM deploy guided. So it's basically gonna do this kind of wizard. As you can see, things are like quite like smooth. It's actually asking us what's the stack name. We can say AWS Serverless Greece, lambda, blah, hello world. Let's call it like that. Maybe it's gonna complain, and it asks you for a region. So you're like, okay, what does this region do, and why is it saying US East? Well, US East is my preferred region. Every account has its preferred region where you want to deploy. So you're saying, okay, I want to use this one. You can specify there are resources in the EU now. Like I think the closest one to Greece is Milan, but most of like Europe kind of people from the central kind of Europe, or like us in the southern Europe or something like that, we're still using. There's like a EU central one, which is like Frankfurt. I'm hoping that maybe one day AWS will open a region in Greece. That would be amazing. I'm not sure Serbia is going to be a good deal where I come from. But anyway, so it actually asks you like, do you want, like shows you resources changes, like blah, 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 to be deployed. Do you want to confirm? And my suggestion is like, always do this, like always confirm changes before deployment. So the reason for that is it's a very good check whether your things have really have you really changed maybe something which you shouldn't. So let's see. What does it do? And it says allow a SAM CLI EM role creation. What it means is, what is EM role? What is this EM? This EM is identity and access management. Okay, a bloated word, right? Well, this identity and access management is basically another small tool which is kind of controlling which thing in your AWS account has rights, permissions to do something. At the beginning, at the very start, every single thing in your AWS account is isolated and has 0 permissions. Okay, a lambda function particularly has no. You can only run it as we did it in the UI. Like nothing else can find its way. Like unless you're using AWS SDK through the outside, and you kind of like there's like a way we manually do that. But in general, there is no way something can reach it. But why is this important? Well, each lambda function has a specific role It's like a role assigned to this lambda function, and to this role you write down permissions, what's it able to do. And in this case, it's just asking, do you want to allow SAM CLI to create this thing? Well, why is this even a question you might ask? Well, because some companies have very restrictive rules where they don't want to allow SAM to kind of manipulate some of the roles. They have it fixed in place. Anyway, in your case, you want to do yes. So it might not have authorization defined. Is this okay? You just say, yeah, that's fine. And it says save arguments to SAM config. Now, this is not like very clear what it does. What this piece does is actually it's creating a SAM config toml file. As we have YAML, we have toml. Imagine that. Anyway, what this SAM config toml file is basically, it's actually keeping this configuration, which it asked us now, into a file. So the next time we do SAM deploy, it won't ask us. Okay. Click yes. And it's basically like doing for resources. It's creating a managed bucket. So if you remember the piece when we said the CloudFormation is uploading things in an S3 bucket at the beginning of our presentation, our lecture, then from the S3 bucket, it then deploys, creates resources. Well, now SAM does it for us automatically. Before SAM deployment, you would have to write something like long called you would have to use the AWS CLI and say AWS, then space CloudFormation, then space package command, and then you would need to specify the stack and everything what you did. And then you would have to do this package basically is preparing would be preparing your piece, your application. And then you have to do deploy, which would then deploy this piece from the S3 bucket into and create the resources. You would have to do 2 commands. And by the way, you would have to have this bucket specified by you, and you don't need to do that, right? So with SAM, you don't have to think about this piece. So just focus on this SAM and on this SAM deploy, and that's it. So it's saying, so let's go here. So it says here like initiating deployment. As you can see, it's packaged, like it packaged to a zip file, and then it uploaded to this this S3 bucket. And then it says waiting for changes to be created, and it says this is the stack, like this is what's going to be created, right? And it says this is the operation. We're going to add a bunch of things. This is the logical resource ID. Now, don't think about what's logical resource ID too much. Basically, just think about it as like a resource ID. That's it. So this is what it created. Like there's a bunch of things, right? And we created only a single function, right? But as we talked, a lot of things are abstracted away from SAM. So SAM, with this function, needed to create a bunch of other stuff, which is the permission, role, function, deployment, stage, and REST API. Now, you're asking yourself, okay, but we didn't specify this, blah, blah, blah. Well, before the era of SAM, you will have to write all of these things manually yourself, each and every resource. So you have to create a lambda permission resource, as you can see here on the left side of my template YAML. You would have to create and specify the EM role. You have to create like everything. I don't want to go through like deployment and stage and REST API. So now everything's kind of like some people might not like it. It's a bit of magic, but at the same time, it's not because you're specifying the API. But anyway, basically this is why SAM is very recommended especially if you're beginning, because you don't have to think about these things. But you don't have to think about them while you're creating this, but you do have to think about them when you deploy them. What do I mean by this is, I mean that all of these resources are actually created. So let's just click yes. So it actually deploys while we're talking. And so you have to think about these resources. So for example, you can go to this kind of stack. So what's the stack you mentioned? So you can see here like CloudFormation stack. Well, this stack is basically kind of like a project. You can think of it as a project, where in this project it's basically like like a simple service project where you specify, these are infrastructure that I'm going to use, and let's just go back here. So in this stack, these are the resources that you're using, and you can have multiple stacks. Anyway, so in this stack, for example, on our left side in the template YAML file, we created this stack, by specifying its resources. And here you can see which resources this stack actually contains. Anyway, what I said was, when we create this application now, when we deploy it, we created each and every one of these resources. So I'm just repeating myself. When something goes bad in production, you will have to manually sometimes. This is not a joke. You don't have to do it manually. You can fix it through the template here and redeploy. But sometimes you might have to go inside the UI and take a look at what's going on and what's wrong. So it's actually super important that you understand that even though you're using SAM, there are these things that exist, that need to exist. So you will have to understand later on, as things proceed, maybe how some of these things work. In majority of cases you won't, but in case it does, just keep on your mind that things are below a bit still complex. You need to understand what's a stage and what's this deployment piece, for example, for an API gateway. But anyway, I just needed to let you know, don't be like surprised. It's maybe sometimes in the future when you become an expert, you will have to go into the nitty-gritty here and understand. Anyway, so as we click deploy, and you can see now here, in your console how things are going. You can also see this in the UI. Before that was the only way you could see how the things were progressing. But now you can see it even in your console without having to go to the UI, which is great. It's actually really streamlining our development time. Yeah, and for example, if something broke, you would see, I don't know, create failed, and you would see some error or something, the reason here, what happened. And at the end, you can see it created at the end a CloudFormation stack called AWS Serverless Greece Hello World, and that's kind of it. And these are the outputs. So it's pretty useful. For example, if we now wanted, let me just see if this might, I don't think it's going to work, but we never know. So there's this kind of value. So yeah, as we talk, these outputs are also being outputted in your console. So you click here, and let's go to the UI, and we kind of click here, and we say, let's see, message hello world. Now, so let's go back here. So this is what created. Let's actually just change this message and let's try it out. So it says hello world, and let's say hello AWS Greece, hello to AWS Greece from Serverless function. And this is what we did. So nothing special. And we come here and say SAM deploy now. So watch this. So as you can see, it automatically inferred the values which we defined before, and we're just deploying, right? So yeah, it's actually just warning that this may not have the authorization, but it's actually doing the same thing which we did before. Now, don't bother yourself with the nitty-gritty about what are the parameter overrides, capabilities yet, and things like that. Don't focus, at the beginning, focus on creating these lambda functions, focus on API, focus on DynamoDB and things like that. After you get comfortable with it, if you're okay, I can create 10 functions which have APIs now and things like that, you start thinking about what's this confirm change set, what's the discipline bucket. So take your time, really. And now it's saying, okay, it's saying it's checking. If you remember, we asked it to ask us every time we deployed, and it says operation was modified. So there was a modification on the function, and there was a modification on the REST API. And for example, this is not kind of correct, but okay, we're gonna we say your survey, we can look through the fingers, we can skip this one. Anyway, all in the US on the English, it's I'm gonna close one eye, and let you pass. Anyway. Anyway, so we'll deploy this change set, click yes, and it's now automatically deploying without us even having to think about it. And as you can see, it's saying update in progress, so it's updating just 2 things. So for example, some people have asked me when I update a function, will it update everything for me? The answer is no. As you can see here, it only updates and focuses on things which have changed. So for example, let's say you have a DynamoDB table and you have a bunch of data there. it won't change it. Like it won't modify your data or truncate your data after you update. So you like just relax, deploy at the beginning, practice, try out a few things, and you're gonna see it's only focusing on things which you changed, not on something else. And as you can see here, it only updated the function and it updated our stack. So it's the same. As you can see, it didn't change even the API. But by the way, if we change the API, the API setup, it still wouldn't change this value because actually it created a reference for you. It actually tied your API to some reference it deployed, and it won't change it unless you do something like super different. Anyway, so let's go to our UI. Let's refresh this message, and as you can see here, I did a typo saying hello TP whatever AWS Greece from a serverless function, and this is basically it. So let's not keep you guys any longer. I'm not gonna go into any other details. As you can see here, you can do like SAM help, and you can see a bunch of things that exist here. But as I said, this is going to be an introduction to AWS SAM. So let's get some questions and let's see how it all goes. Okay, we have some already questions here. So it says, do you have any best practices to propose for the structure of a product? I guess you can read this, but I guess for someone who's going to be looking at the video, I think I should read the question out loud so someone else can maybe, learn from this. So it says, again, let me repeat, do you have any best practices to propose for the structure of a product with many lambdas, 40 like you mentioned? Whenever you're deploying a SAM template, is it advised to deploy all the lambdas every time? Is it possible and okay to deploy single lambdas instead of every lambda defined every time? Is it possible to deploy? Yeah. I understand. So it says, is it possible to deploy lambdas with changes? As you could see here now, it deploys only lambdas with changes. So it doesn't update. So for example, if I did another lambda, so if you want, I can just like do a copy paste the same one and change its name, and you can. Like you only specify lambdas that you really want. You just change those which you want to update, and that's it. And even if you update it, for example, just a single piece, it won't touch the code base, so you don't have to worry about this piece. Does this answer your question, Thanasis?
Yeah, almost. I mean, if you read the rest of the comment, it's that sometimes it kind of makes difficult to have common dependencies with code. So what would the suggestion be in that case? If you have common util functions or something, would it be would you advise to have layers for that purpose?
You can use layers. So for some people who are not familiar with layers, AWS layers are called AWS lambda layers. AWS lambda layers is basically a small kind of repository where basically you can put the code which you want to run kind of with every lambda function, so that it's automatically prepared. So every time a lambda function loads, it doesn't load all of your code base, like everything what Thanasis asked, like all of the common things and everything. It only would load like the main business logic for a lambda, and to pick up the common libraries and dependencies from this lambda layer. Basically, that's it. That's its main focus. You can even read about it online. But anyway, so for the question on how do you solve these common libraries, so there are two ways. Layers is a possibility, so you can use layers and provide your libraries there, but there is a better way. So let me just show you maybe on the screen. So there is this example. If you're familiar with TypeScript, Slobodan, my friend, which I talked about in the example, actually he's a pretty expert on it, serverless. But anyway, so he created this like TypeScript template where he's using Webpack to where you can actually use this case, like this example, where you have this common kind of file, common libraries, and you can put it just in a common kind of like library. The Webpack will automatically, when it builds your TypeScript functions or your Node.js functions, it will automatically take these common libraries and put them in your Lambda function, and then you would build stuff. Okay, so there are basically two ways. There's another third way, which is a bit more manual kind of labor, which is basically like, just installing all of those node libraries inside of the Lambda functions, which is not like the best practice. The best practice is to install it in the single folder, in the single root Node.js folder, and then with the Webpack you would copy these things when they're being built based on the imported modules. You can use this configuration on the serverless, so serverless pub/samts on GitHub. So try it out, and you can ask us if you have some questions or whatever. But yeah, basically you need to have these libraries with your Lambda functions, otherwise they won't run. They would actually error, because if there isn't a module there, it's just gonna break. But anyway, instead of just like copying stuff inside or using layers, you can even use this piece where you can like use Webpack and like only package the things which you really need for Lambda function. Yeah. I even heard about people that actually uglified some of their Lambda code, which is a bit crazy, but yeah, listen, if you get charged by 100 milliseconds, which is super cheap, by the way, 1 million invocations of a Lambda per, 1 million invocations of a single Lambda, it costs 20 cents. Like, I don't mean euros, I mean dollars. So basically, one single, it's pretty cheap anyway. And you have 1 million free each month, by the way. So there's a free tier which doesn't change. Any other questions?
There is one more.
Okay.
Scroll down.
Oh, I didn't see. Okay. I said, are there any open source serverless projects where I could contribute and get some hands-on experience? Are there other ways to learn and practice? Okay. So there are. So for example, I contributed to AWS SAM by itself. Like AWS SAM is an open source project. You can, let me just go to the screen. AWS, let me see, GitHub, AWS SAM. I'm like super lazy, as you can see, like I don't want to use Google. I just want to, anyway. So for example, I even contributed on SAM. SAM is basically the tool itself is open source. So for example, there's a lot of issues, a lot of pull requests, and a lot of things here. I think even in the project you can see like, maybe in the issues, I'm not sure if they did some labels here, like where to start or something. I don't think they have, like maybe there's good first issues. Let me see like if there's something. Yeah. So for example, you can use these contributors good first issue, and you can see how you can help out, for example, with SAM. This is good. If this is too much, I would then go a step before that, which would be maybe building serverless components. So you have AWS Serverless Application Repository. So this is a place which I really love. So for example, you can build components which are now open source and share them here. So for example, you can find a lot of stuff. I don't know, like for let's say S3, Lambda, DynamoDB, for example. I created one of these, as you can see here. So for example, you can click on this and say, you can build components and then share them here. And for example, this is for example, you can go to this, I don't know, like you can build your own component and then, kind of share it with other people who want to build it. For example, I can show you mine, and you can see how like how are they being used. Let's say most deployed. Let me see. Yeah. So I have some, for example, for sending emails, which are like 1,300 deployments and things like that. Like, so people can actually automatically one click, they can take this one and they can one click deploy, and they'll be dragged here where they can like just like see what's the template. What are they creating? As you can see, this is the SAM thing. This is the template which we use, but it's a bit different, right? It's actually the same, but just like configured. As you can see, like and there are like these resources which you created. So basically, you can create these components by yourself, and then other people can just like do a few clicks and create this whole structure for you. And if you don't want to do that, for example, maybe that's something also a bit hard or something. I would maybe suggest like just then creating several view pieces. So let's say you can start, based on your, I don't know if you're working already or not. So you can, for example, see how your current applications, how would you create them using serverless. So you can start by, you don't have to do, by the way, you don't have to use lambdas. You can even, for example, start using AppSync or Amplify. So you can start using that piece and build a few apps, see how it works, open it up on GitHub, share with other people, and then move on to building components or some other frameworks. Or, I mean, most of the serverless stuff is kind of open source, the libraries, tools, and things like that. So yeah, you can feel free to start like that. I hope this answers the questions. If you have something specific, please do ask. Okay, so there's Stavros asked, is there a simple way to simulate the Lambda events for local testing instead of copy pasting a JSON from inside the CloudWatch? Well, if you use the SAM CLI, you can use it, I think, to generate events as well. I'm not sure. Let me just kind of show you if I can find it quickly. So SAM CLI generate event. I think there's let me just so this is something which you can use to locally generate specific events. If you're a beginner, it's better to use the one from the template, but if you want, you can take a look in the documentation, see what are, these are the things which you can, and you can just say which are the ones which are available. There are these events from all of these Lex, Kinesis, DynamoDB, and so forth, which are the events that you can simulate and locally try them out using a SAM local invoke. And then, but for SAM local invoke, as you can see here, I'm a serverless developer and I have a Docker, right? Which is why do I have Docker here, right? Anyway, but the thing is, it actually requires that you have Docker installed and set up so that you could run this image of a Lambda locally. If you're doing it if you're testing in production, then you don't have to do it, but otherwise you have to. Yeah. Okay. Is there any other question that you wanted to ask? Yeah. Welcome. Are there any other questions? Feel free to think.
Yeah, actually. Oh, yeah. Okay.
Is there an example of an app realized completely and only with lambdas? Yes, there's a lot of them actually. And so I'm going to mention a few. So I mentioned this Slobodan friend of mine, really good person, and he's also a serverless hero. You can ping him even on Twitter, and me as well. So his startup is called Vacation Tracker. You can use it. So it's completely it's completely made on serverless. So yeah, you can for example that one. You have MindMap, which is Goiko's, another talked about. This is for free mind mapping tools. This is one of the first products that was 100% on serverless, from 2016. Yeah, Lambda was actually GA, globally available from the beginning of 2016. It was announced on the late 2015. Anyway, so I can share with you some other things CodePen, which is one of the things. As if you're a front-end developer, you probably know about it. So how do you discover this front-end code? Actually, it's not 100%. Maybe it is right now, but it was actually Ruby Rails, a monolith, and then it moved to Lambdas in literally 2016, 2017 as well. We built a tool called Claudia.js, which is also something with SAM, but it's just for just a second, not here, yeah, search all GitHub, which is yeah, just a moment. some tool for deployment, not some tool, a tool we built for deployment. Actually, Goiko started it and Slobodan and I joined for deploying easily Node.js projects. But yeah, so yeah, there are many other. I don't want to mention. There's like a bunch of like, I don't know if you heard about Vanguard, which is the US insurance and investment kind of huge company. Well, they're not completely 100% serverless, but they moved from mainframe to serverless in a couple of years. Then like, I don't know, like there's just a bunch of them. You can even see like, I don't know, Nike's, Coca-Cola. There's a bunch of companies that are now moving serverless, and there's more and more. So yeah, if you really want to get a list of those, I suggest you kind of go to this AWS Serverless kind of page, and you can like their use cases where who are the people who are using serverless. Of course they're gonna like benefit or whatever, but I mean they're gonna sell actually benefit. They're gonna sell their like who's using our services whatever. But I know for a fact, for example, that iRobot has literally like thousands of lambda functions which are actually if you're using iRobots for cleaning up your rooms or whatever, well, you wouldn't believe it, but most of them are now calling lambda functions and things like that. So yeah, you can find a lot of those examples outside. Even my company is not 100%, but like there are slowly pieces on from every company moving towards serverless, because if you're gonna build something, why pay for it like $100 or $200 or $500 from the beginning? Why not just wait a bit and build it on serverless? Not wait a bit, build actually a lot faster than on serverless. You don't pay for nothing until it gets used. And when it gets used, you get charged super small on a single request basis. So yeah, anyway, I guess this kind of answers this question. Something else? Yeah, you're welcome.
Actually, Alex, I'm sending a link for everyone here. They can join our open Slack public community. You can join too if you haven't already.
Okay.
Yeah, we have a lot of other AWS specialists also in Slack. So
great.
Yeah, they can join and ask anything they want. So thank you very much, Alex.
You're welcome. I want to help out the friendly community from all around our like Balkans and Europe. So yeah, I guess maybe sometime in the future when all this crisis kind of drops down, I might be coming to Greece so we can organize something in person so some of you can meet. But until then, I guess we can talk online, right?
Yeah, obviously. It was very, very fun to watch a very simple example of how to build an AWS serverless.
Yeah, so this is basically an intro. So if you guys maybe later want to do something more of a, let's see, for example, how would we build a CRUD app, HTTP REST CRUD thing on like an API with login. We can organize something like that, like maybe during the summer, but I'm not sure, like if some people are going to go to vacation. Yeah. Anyway, if you want to do something like that, we can do like a demo, something like this. This is super easy to make, and we can spend 1.5 hours, build a login, see how you can use Cognito, because for example now you have some other services like AWS Cognito where you don't have to think about how do you like integrate with Google or like Facebook or some other kind of services. You can do that with a serverless kind of service called Cognito, which actually can integrate with your Lambda automatically. So anyway, thank you guys for coming, and I hope it was useful for some of you guys. And feel free to ping me anytime you need something. And if you're interested in this, ping Kostas, and we can definitely organize something and get these lessons maybe even longer and so forth. Yeah.
Yes, definitely. Thank you very much, guys, for joining us. It really makes me happy that see you guys interested in knowing more and joining to our events. and there will be more coming. In Slack, I think and correct me if I'm wrong, Thanasis, I think we have a form where you can go and fill out the form and see what you're most interested of, and build the whole meetup around your needs and not our needs.
Exactly. We're waiting for feedback from everyone regarding the presentations you want to see, and of course we want, if you have anything interesting to share, if your expertise or your journey with AWS services, contact us so that we can schedule a presentation.
Yeah, anyone who wants to talk or show or say his opinion about AWS or anything else, the only thing that he has to do is just send me a message in Slack or on Twitter or via an email, and we'll schedule it and he can talk. Anyone can talk. Anyone can present. So I think this is pretty much it. If there's any other questions or statements that needs to be done, I think this is pretty much it. Thank you guys very much for joining us, and thank you, Alex, for hosting.
I helped.
Yeah, okay, you helped. No, okay, thank you guys. Bye bye.
See you guys. Bye bye.
Good night.